Shana Tova. A Catholic missionary, well-versed in the art of proselytization, approaches a Jewish man with the hope of converting him. The Catholic explains his church's theology to the Jew. We call it the Trinity, he says. There is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Jewish man responds, "Look, fella, I don't even believe in one God. What makes you think I'm ready to believe in all three?" When Rabbi Brown and I sat together at Camp Kalsman this summer to plan the second day of Rosh Hashanah services, and specifically what to do for this sermon slot, I wanted to bring in a guest speaker. I know that there is an element of growth through suffering in Judaism, but you just heard me yesterday, and even I don't enjoy the sound of my own voice that much to make you endure 2 sermons in a row. But then we settled on the topic of God and science, and I was faced with another conundrum. Rather than having too much to say, I was worried I wouldn't have anything to say. It's at this point in some congregations where Maury takes out his watch, leans over to his buddy Fred, and says, "Let's put money on how long it will take the rabbi to say nothing." But the question of God and science in Judaism seems at first pass oxymoronic. One deals with the mind and reason, the other heart and soul. Try to apply one to the other and you get out of it pop culture theology like the power of positive thinking and everything happens for a reason. Yes, there is truth in both statements. Positive thinking is incredibly powerful, but science would tell you it doesn't move God over to your side. It moves you over to your own side. And everything does happen for a reason, or maybe better put, there is a reason for everything that happens. Is it part of some master and divine plan? That would be hard to prove in almost any instance. And then add those things that happen in your own self-interest, and I think that we have entered the realm of magical thinking. Now, before you run up the street to BI or Sharet Tzedek and ask for emergency membership because you think your rabbi doesn't believe in God, I do very strongly believe in God. I just don't believe in the old man with a beard sitting on a cloud kind of God. The God that manipulates the world like puppets on a string. When the laws of nature are set aside so that I can find a parking space that I pray for one, or more seriously, a God that will cure a loved one from illness or disease, simply because I pray. I wish it worked that way, but I don't think it does. No amount of prayer will make the sun stand still, or the oceans part, or the Blue Jays win the World Series. They might win, but it's not your prayers, or mine. Both God and science, though, are not mutually exclusive either. They are, I think, harmonious. Albert Einstein famously wrote, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." The statement, which comes from the great expert in physics, not theology, is illustrative of my own view. Einstein's statement is that the value of reason in understanding the world is a form of profound faith. It is a religion in itself. The religion he believes in is curiosity and the relentless pursuit of knowledge through understanding. Jerry A. Coyne, a professor of ecology and evolution at the University of Chicago, explains that this can be confusing because the religious meaning of faith is, quote, firm belief without substantial evidence, while the scientist's faith in the laws of physics is simply shorthand for, quote, strong confidence based on replicated evidence and experience about how things are going. It's the scientific use of the term faith, strong confidence in replicated evidence and experience, that is the God I believe in. Further, Coyne explains, we don't have faith in reason. We use reason because it helps us find out things. It is, in fact, the only way that we've ever made progress in understanding the universe. This is for me the great value of Torah. And here I don't just mean the scrolls behind me, but the whole canon of Jewish thought and writings. Our constant struggle and wrestling with the question till we arrive at an answer, only then to have more questions once we get there. That is, I think, a religious life. God does not explain the universe, but in understanding the universe and everything in it, we can begin to understand God. If by God we mean more than an old man with a beard sitting on a cloud, but rather, as Mordechai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, taught, God is the power that makes for salvation. God is the force within human beings which drives us to seek goodness and understanding. God is that which implores us to make the world a better place. A definition that was shared with me once was that God is an acronym for good, orderly direction, G-O-D. God and religion are the force that drives us, properly applied, toward goodness and understanding. Science and reason are the tools we bring to bear to make the world a better place. They are not in conflict. They are in harmony. Or so at least I think. Rabbi Brown is now going to share her own answer to that question, and then we'll entertain your questions for hopefully a brief discussion.
Thank you, Rabbi. When I was in my 20s, and we'd get together for a family gathering, my grandmother of blessed memory, if someone ever got a paper cut or a splinter, she'd look at me and she'd say, "She was going to be a doctor. Maybe she can help." She was proud that I became a rabbi, but I think she really wanted me to be a doctor. And I was going to be a doctor. In fact, I was obsessed with medicine and with the human body and all of its intricacies. And in some ways, I actually will credit science for drawing me to the rabbinate. Because I think it was as I was starting to learn more and more about the function of our bodies and the tiniest details that makes everything work, that I found myself completely in awe. And it is within that sense of awe that I seem to most find God and my spirituality. We call that notion of awe in Hebrew yirah. Yirah sometimes is translated as fear, but is better understood as awe, in the notion that we stand before something greater and we're not quite sure how or when and what it is, but we know there is something extraordinary there. I think of the moments of awe as the goosebump moments, the times we can feel the hair standing on end on our arms. Many of us experience that with the birth of a baby, being in nature, looking up at the stars in the sky. I remember an experience I had when I was in rabbinical school living in New York City, and I went to the Hayden Planetarium at the Museum of Natural Science. Maybe some of you have also visited. And there's this amazing thing there. They call it the cosmic pathway, where you spiral down from one exhibit to the other. And as you're going on this pathway, it's 360 feet long. You are traveling around the 13 billion year history of the universe. And every stride you take is measured in millions of years. And the relative blink of the eye, that is the human era, is depicted at the end of the path as the thickness of a single strand of hair. And when I first walked down this and I saw that, I remember I had to sit down because I was so in awe at my smallness in the universe. Now, awe we often think of as being a religious experience, that yirah, that sense of God in the world. And so the question I want to focus on in my remarks is, how does science deal with awe? Does it serve a purpose? Why do humans experience awe? There was actually a study done by two professors from UC Berkeley last year that showed that awe helps bind us to others, that it motivates us to act in collaborative ways that enable strong groups and cohesive communities. So in other words, awe is an evolutionary tool for us to join together in meaningful community. It's a really beautiful way of thinking about it. I love what Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the wonderful rabbis of the 20th century, writes about the concept of awe. He writes in his very famous, well-known book, God in Search of Man, which is in many ways about how we think about our relationship between human beings and God, and what role awe plays in that. He writes, "The meaning of awe is to realize that life takes place under wide horizons, horizons that range beyond the span of an individual life, or even the life of a nation, a generation, or an era. Awe enables us to perceive in the world imitations of the divine, to sense in small things the beginnings of infinite significance, to sense the ultimate in the common and the simple, to feel in the rush of the passing the stillness of the eternal. Awe precedes faith. It is at the root of faith. We must grow in awe in order to reach faith. We must be guided by awe to be worthy of faith. Awe, rather than faith, is the cardinal attitude of the religious Jew." As Jews, we often struggle with faith and with belief. So maybe we need to move away from a focus on questions of belief and move towards experiences of awe. After all, Judaism is a religion that is much more about what we do and how we act than about what we believe. And science is suggesting that feelings of awe lead us to acts of loving kindness. So look up at the stars and then use that feeling to make life better here on earth. Shana Tova.
So we'd like to just briefly entertain questions or a dialogue or discussion, if anyone has a question on what was presented, or not. My father.
How can you describe a miracle such as the Seasons instance described in the newspaper where a 175-pound man perhaps can lift up a 3,000-pound vehicle and have a person pulled out from it?
So for those who didn't hear the question, my father decided to throw me a curveball, he said, and which he did throughout my childhood. And how is it that a man of normal body size and relatively normal strength could, in a moment of heroic act, lift up a 3,000-pound car, as we've heard described in newspapers and news reports, to rescue a trapped individual? My own response to that would be that that is part of the divine plan of human beings. That we have within us this untapped power and strength that we so rarely access, and it's not only a physical strength, but we know that it's also emotional strength and fortitude as well. We could ask the same question as how is it that somebody is able to stay up for 2 or 3 days at a time with a crying baby as they get them through a colicky period, or how is it that someone is able to endure the tremendous rigors and challenges of chemotherapy and still survive the treatment to be on the other side of the disease. That we have so much incredible potential inside of us that we barely scratch the surface. So to me, that isn't a miracle, that is always there. If there is something miraculous in it, it is that in that moment we accessed it, and how can we replicate that so we can access it more often to be of greater service to ourselves and to others? Rabbi Brown?
I'm answering the same question.
Is there another question?
Chris.
So we just today read the classic biblical description of creation. Most people here would not be expected to believe in a literal sense that that is how the process of creation unfolded. And in fact, Rabbi Brown tells us that scientists, and that would include most of us who take science seriously, believe it took 13 billion years to get from there to here. But there are people who use the phrase intelligent design, that something lay behind this process of moving from the Big Bang to what we have today, the things that inspire the kind of awe that you referred to. And the concept of intelligent design by people who use that phrase is often linked to the concept of God. So it seems appropriate to ask one or both of our rabbis how they respond to that concept.
I think that the verses of Breshit that we read today don't have to be separate from scientific understandings of the origins of the universe. Not in a literal sense, of course, as you said, Chris, but I think about the metaphor behind it that I find to be quite moving, of the notion of the creation of light on day one. That it's not the light of the sun and the moon and the stars, that comes later, but that there's some primal light, some light I see as an energy, as God, in a way, that could be understood as that notion of intelligent design, that there is something sacred in the origins of the universe that we see reflected in kind of these moments of these 6 days of creation as these kind of phases of evolution, or phases of the development of what we came to inherit as human beings in our experience in the universe. So I think that Judaism, from all different perspectives, not just in the Reform movement, I think there is a willingness to try and blend or coexist between Torah and science, that it doesn't have to be you're in one camp or the other. And I think that the notion of intelligent design does fit well within that understanding for me.
Could I just add to that just a bit? So recently there was an article published where they found the answer to the age-old question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? This isn't a joke. And no, it's not a joke. And in fact, they found that the chicken came first. And how is that? That at some point they found that the egg came first. Sorry. Had you on there for a second. I wasn't planning on giving this answer. I had to remember a second. They found that the egg came first, and how is it they found that? Is that over a period of genetic mutation, over those billions of years and eons, at some point some bird laid a chicken egg instead of whatever egg was supposed to be right before that. And that made a lot of sense to me in my, I avoided science by becoming a rabbi, but for me, in what Rabbi Brown answers, and she's knowingly or not actually referencing Rabbi Larry Kushner, who speaks about that first day of creation, the creation of light, as being the light of intelligence, the light of knowledge, the light of understanding. That's why we think when cartoons with the light bulb, that's what it's connected to, or they connected it to that. That the world existed, there was stuff, and our Torah references that there was chaos. The world was tohu vavohu, it was complete and void and just complete mishigas. And then at some point we made order out of things, and that's the element of creation, and that's what understanding is. Understanding and knowledge, that first day was the first spark of reason, the first spark of understanding, to put all of these things in order. So I think that there was stuff before God, but I think that God is the explanation of all the stuff. Jean, last question. Right.
Said we didn't have the planets and the moon and the things that define what we know now.
Mhm.
She said, all in God.
Right.
And because now is so different from then, we don't have words to really describe what then is, and the concept description is a day. She says, go outside that box.
And I'll just repeat what Jean said briefly, that succinctly, that in her class at UBC it was, right? A professor asked the question, well, how long was a biblical day or a day of creation? Because if the sun wasn't created till day 4, then how do we know? It wasn't necessarily a 24-hour period. It could have been eons. And if we think beyond that box, then, indeed it kind of fits and flows with Darwin's theory of evolution. I leave that to you to ponder over. Any final thoughts, Rabbi Brown?
No, I'm just we'll continue the conversation.
Wish we'd brought in a guest speaker? Before we conclude our service with the